Nice sunny Sunday morning, so a great time to be going portable on a bike ride and do some QRP operating. All I'm taking is in this small bag. Oh, apart from the skrid pole antenna mast that I'll be using. As to what's in the bag, a question a lot of people ask, I'll go into more detail in a moment. So, what are the 13 things I need to get on air? I'll describe them in the order I get them out of the bag. Well, first of all, the thing not in the bag is the telescoping pole. Go for a length of about 8 or 9 metres. This one is, when it's retracted, about a metre or a bit over, which is enough to fit on a bike, but there are compact ones which might only be 60 centimetres long. They're more expensive, they've got more sections, but if you want something small, light, they may be the better choice for you. Anyway, if you're in Australia, this one comes from Haverford's Marine. You can order them online. There's different lengths. So get one that's say 8 or 9 metres, though there are taller ones. Anyway, if you are in an area where there's lots of trees and you can throw something up into the canopy, then you might not need this pole. But because I'm near the beach and there's not much in the way of trees, then one of these is really essential. And it's super versatile. You can either set it up as a vertical antenna with the wire just going up the pole, or as a support for an inverted V or lightweight dipole. And for the inverted V, I usually favour the end-fed type. That's because you can use super light wire. You can just support it in the middle and have all your antenna couplers, other things down near the ends. So the wire can be light, thin, and not support much weight. And for that reason, that's also why I tend not to use traps or loading coils very much. Traps never, loading coils only if you're saving some space. Anyway, on to the rest of the contents. A hat, bit of paper, actually the back of an envelope. Next we have what looks like a mess of wires. Anyway, this one is about 22 metres of wire, not critical, end-fed. It's about half a wavelength on 7 megahertz and a full wavelength on 14 megahertz. And if you want to operate on 3.5, well, it's near enough to a quarter wavelength there. So really versatile. With an L-match antenna coupler, you can get a lot of bands out of it. And you might just be able to see behind it is a rope. That's handy for tying off to something. So that's on the same spool as this. Right here is just maybe 3 or 4 metres of wire as a short counterpoise. Handy for end-fed. Little earphones. Handy if you are in a public location and you don't want to draw too much attention to your activities. Also if signals are weak or there's extraneous noise like, I don't know, vehicles, people shouting, even wind. It can sometimes be a battle to hear stations, so yep, good idea to have some earphones just in case. This is the microphone cord. Not the coiled type, I'd prefer the coiled type, but the plugs on mine broke. So for the FT817, just this bit of ordinary Cat5 cable works until I get something better. Now, have I left the microphone at home? Well, there's nothing in this compartment, so I'll have to try the next one. Oh, by the way, antenna coupler. This one is an L-match. It's got a wide range of impedances. You can probably see the numbers down the side. That's the inductance. So you can get up to 15 microhenries in 1 microhenry steps. And here is the tuning capacitor. Goes up to a maximum of about 220 picofarad. And there's a male plug right in the box, so you don't need a connecting cable between it and the transceiver. Morse key, small, light, rugged, a bit crude, but it served me really well for many years. Just made on a piece of chopping board, bit of circuit board for the
conductors. I've had to coat the bottom of it with solder several times because of the wear, and then a strip of aluminium, a knob from somewhere, you can get it from a hardware shop, and a little screw to make contact. And there's a spring in there as well, which you might just be able to see. Oh good, here's the microphone. I didn't forget it after all. It's a Yaesu MH31. Now, it's not the greatest microphone for portable QRP. The audio is a bit soft. In a previous video, in fact I think I've done 2 videos, I describe how to modify this microphone by putting in an electro insert, and that gives a much harsher but more penetrating audio.
And I think if it wasn't for that microphone, I wouldn't hear you at all there, Peter. So it's really knocking, cutting through all the noise and what have you.
One of the most important things, power cable for the FT817. Don't leave that at home. I tend to use external rather than internal batteries. Overall, you need about 1 amp hour per hour of operating. That is fairly active operating, not just tuning around and listening, although you will spend most of the time doing that. Oh, something to eat. Looking at the condition of that, I better eat that straight away. Right here, batteries. This is 4 18650s. Now, if you add up the voltages of them, especially when they've just been recharged, it comes up to over 16 volts, which is the maximum the FT817 can use. So I've just got in the lead a diode, or there might be 2 diodes to drop the voltage. Anyway, the voltage of this never exceeds 16 volts. Now, if you want better efficiency with the FT817, because the FT817 will work with, say, 11 or 12 volts, extra above that is dissipated as heat, then you could use a DC to DC converter. Make sure it's RF quiet, but that will provide a efficient voltage conversion. I haven't bothered with that. Anyway, with the batteries, I take them out of this holder and put them in another charger. Because of the way I've got this diode, I can't charge them just in here. Some cream to stop sunburn. This is the FT817 itself. Won't go into too much detail. Half my videos feature it. So, yeah, that's the transceiver. People say, oh, should I get another rig like an ICOM 705 or Elecraft? There's some of the cheaper Chinese rigs. But overall, for the stuff that I do, even though it's a 20-year-old model, the FT818, which you can get now, is almost the same, hardly different. It's still pretty robust. It gives you all the bands, 5 watts, and unlike some of the Elecraft rigs, it doesn't have as many holes. The Elecraft is like a fine day portable operating. When you're in a park, it's not windy, it's not rainy, and you don't have sand blowing around like you do here at the beach. And it's also more expensive, so you're not going to get that many more contacts with an Elecraft or the new ICOM 705 compared to this. Although those rigs do offer a bit more power, which could be handy in some situations. Got a lot more features, but yeah, for general portable operating, the 817 is pretty good. If you want to go even lighter than this all weighs up at about 2 kilograms. And the FT817 mounts for about half of that. And the other thing is batteries. If you want long battery life, if you're really concerned about weight, then a CW only rig would be better because of its lower current consumption. The 817 draws about 300 milliamp on receive, which is not bad, but not great either, given that you can build a homebrew receiver, can draw maybe 20, 30, 40 milliamps on receive. And most of the time you are spending on receive, so if you can save current there, then that's all the better. In fact, if you're really into minimalist construction, you can hear amateur signals on a receiver that draws a 2 or 3 milliamps, but then you're getting into your ultralight stuff, which might be handy for some, but I'm not climbing any hills and I'm only out for a few hours at a time. So weight is not as important for me as it is for people that are on multi-day mountain treks. So for me, the FT817 is fine. So yeah, that's all the setup. Let's get on air and see if this makes any contacts.
You don't see them till the last second. Yeah.
First contact was made straight after setting up with VK3YE, probably doing a SOTA activation or similar. That was on 17 metres, nothing on other frequencies like 21 and 24, but a strong beacon on 28 megahertz. So that's the Sydney beacon. So a bit of sporadic eddy propagation.
Village here, and I sailed in from the seaside when I went out on a cruise one day.
VK3YE Portable. Good morning. VK4GFT Maritime Mobile in Port Signet, Tasmania. Well, welcome to the Comedy Net. It's kind of an antique net with a bunch of antique people on it, primarily organized around maritime mobiles, but with a great many land-based stations involved, as you've probably picked out if you've been listening for a while. But at any rate, we're on this frequency starting currently at 2140 Zulu every day of the year. And everybody's welcome to join us, yourself included. Okay, Peter, you're putting out one hell of a good signal for QRP. You're about S5, S6 here direct. And, I'm also listening on a South Australia-based SDR, and you're booming in there. So whatever you're doing it well. And maybe sitting on a pier over the water is almost as good as being on a boat.
Good morning, Peter. This is VK7 ALS in southern Tasmania. You're 5 and 4 to me, but readable. VK3YE, VK3 Yankee Echo, VK2 Oxford Whiskey. The name is Ray. Romeo Alpha Yankee. We're running the net control this morning for the Comedy Net. And I'll have to welcome you, Peter. I do know you quite well via your YouTube blogs, and they're very, very interesting. Your readability 5 and a strength 7 here. The location is near Tumbarumba, up in the Snowy Mountains there. So.
VK5 MJD.
Life is carrying on in our usual quiet manner, man.
VK7 Delta Golf on 7140. See you in a minute, VK5 QD, back in a minute, Andrew, if you can QRX.
Yeah, no worries there, I'll take a standby. You can drop off a little bit, but sure, something again, I'll take a standby anyway, VK4RE. VK3YE Portable, with company VK4RE.
Yeah, hi Peter, your S8 here, good signal. That probably stands to reason, although we're fairly close, aren't we, Peter? Your S8, great signal. I wonder where you are, be down the beach somewhere, making the best of summer.
So there you go, that's the first contact with the infamous the infamous Peter Parker. So Nice to work you there, Peter. Yeah, I actually used to make something very similar with the swinging inductor of primary.
VK3YE, VK2YAC in Sydney, you're between a 1 and a 5 signal strength here.
Part of it, my call was 6 kilos for Radio Echo, Romeo Echo. Excuse me, and I just want to say, if it wasn't for that microphone you're on, I wouldn't be able to hear you.
Yeah, excellent modulation there, Peter. If you're still there, if you happen to still be there, Peter, what are you doing with the microphone? It's just excellent for what you were doing. It's just perfect. VK5QD listening. Really, or most of HF, amazing.
WD8 Charlie, VK7RG out of here. Catch you later, Ben. Thanks, mate. Thank you very much. Have a good day, 73.
Yeah, okay, Peter. Good morning, mate. VK3 Yankee Echo Portable. VK2CR, good signal here, 5 and 7. Mate, I'm in Sydney. I'm about 50 kilometres from the centre of the city. Okay, I've got Peter, VK3YE. Not real strong. I would have to give you a 4x5. That's my noise level. Go ahead, Peter. Yeah, good on you, mate. I love these QRP stations, but I'm VK2. Victor Kilo 2. What 2? Bravo Yankee Foxtrot. Peter, over. Yankee Echo Portable. Good morning again, Peter. It's 5 and 4. 54. Yes, sir.
All up about 12 contacts in 90 minutes of operating. As for the bands, 17 metres, 1 contact, 40 metres, most of the contacts, a couple of good contacts on 20 and another on 10. So mostly 40 metres, but definitely worthwhile to be having the other bands as well. You never know what you can work. As for distances, most would have been about 1500 kilometres. There was a VK4 in there, mostly around 500 to 1000 kilometres. So no DX or big long DX, but still worthwhile. Mostly good reports from other stations. The microphone mod definitely proved its value, and as far as the modes, mostly SSB, but also CW was worth having as well. So yeah, successful summer portable QRP outing. If you like this style of operating and want to do it yourself, then check out my 3 books on the topic. Minimum QRP, all about low power amateur radio equipment and operating, and 2 antenna books, hand carried QRP antennas, portable antennas that can fit onto poles like this, and more hand carried QRP antennas. Thousands have been sold and there's been great reviews. For more information, check out my website vk3ye.com or search the titles on Amazon.
How are you going to get energy from your lovely little honeypot there that's swarming with lots of RF energy, totally alive with RF energy? If you want to go with thinking about it in a voltage sense of really extreme voltages, because the thing was unloaded. Just goes back to a basic tuned circuit. It's got lots of voltage across it. It's got lots of potential energy, but it ain't going anywhere. You know, it's all voltage. You know, it's alive. Put a fluoro near it. It's alive with voltage. It's certainly an underutilized circuit, an undercoupled circuit, if you like. It's got just a tank that's alive with useless energy. So they had to bring their real-world aerial, which is generally a fairly low impedance device. It certainly is these days. 50 ohms is really low impedance, low resistance, if you like. You know, the ideal aerial that nobody seems to own. You know, one-to-one aerial's actually a 50 ohm resistor. It's got no reactance. You know, 0 SWR. I haven't found the bloke that owns one yet, but you know, that's the perfect load. And you had to bring the real world resistor towards the tank, and that's what they did. They had a little coil, usually a coupling coil, their aerial coil, they brought that coil near the honeypot, and as they did, there's a bit of energy getting coupled to the aerial, and all of a sudden they had 1 watt going up the aerial. Thing is, it changed the resonance point of their tank, and they thought, we'll bring it in a bit closer to the, bring the coil from the aerial, the real world aerial, in a little bit closer to the tank, to the honeypot. And the power's gone up again. I've got 10 watts now. 10 watts. And Joe down the road tells me he's hearing a tone as I'm tuning as I'm increasing the coupling or increasing the loading. He was starting to load the antenna a bit, he was starting to load the tank a bit. He's putting a load on the tank. He was extracting power from the tank. So that's how he did his loading. That's how our grandfathers did the loading. They could only vary the real world connection between the tank and the aerial. They brought the aerial closer to the honeypot. The trouble is, eventually what happened is they were increasing the loading on the honeypot, and they had to re-resonate the tank. And when they re-resonated the tank, the output power of the tank went up because they re-resonated it, because pulling the real world aerial, connecting the real world aerial, coupling the real world aerial to the tank, caused the tank to go out of resonance. But this scenario went on and on to the point where, he was milking the cow. He'd bring the real world aerial into the tank, the power would go up, but the tank would detune, so he'd re-resonate the tank, but then the power would go up again. And he'd bring the real world aerial into the tank again, up would go the power, re-resonate the tank, up would go the power again. It went on. This was beautiful, but the point came when that critical coupling happened, and the loading was just perfect. Maximum power was getting transferred. The valves were seeing their desired load, because every time he brought that real world aerial in, the loading increased. Like the valves would have been seeing an increasing, the valves would have been seeing a decreasing resistance. They would have been seeing an increasing load, like a decreasing resistance. The aerial would have been decreasing. The aerial was increasing their load. In other words, the aerial was producing less resistance for the tank. But the power kept going up. But once you get to that point where you increase the load a bit more, once that area went in close to the tank, physically close to the tank, the power actually went down. And even though they could re-resonate their tank, the power was less than what it should have been. So at that point, they'd withdraw their coupling, they'd withdraw their aerial physically from the tank a bit, which decreased the load, and up went their power. The sweet spot was where they got maximum power, obviously, and that was their loading control, was physically, they call it a swinging link. The link would swing in and out physically. That was their loading control. You and I have the pleasure of just having a loading control, does the same thing now, which is quite magic. And that's really doing the same thing. When we clockwise that loading control, or increase the loading, or increase the coupling, one the same thing. It's the same thing as swinging the link in towards the honeypot there. Yeah, did I bore you silly there, Andrew? It's more trying to create a picture. The swinging link thing, I think, was very instructive for giving us a real practical demonstration of what's happening in the real world. Although our generation, certainly me, grew up with two knobs there, the plate and the loading, I really didn't know what they were about. In a practical sense, never mind the theory. You can have a professor of physics, I think, rattle on for a whole afternoon on, and more, probably several lectures as to what's going on there at a physics level, because it's quite complex, coefficient of coupling and lots of other complex things going on, interactions between the circuitry. There's quite a lot going on there. But you and I, as hams, don't need to know that. We just have to know how to adjust things so we don't blow amplifiers up and things like that, which, many still don't get right. You get a lot of people who've got burnt out plate capacitors and things because they've undercoupled and the voltages across the tank soar when you don't have your coupling right at that high power. So, there's still it's probably good that we move to solid state in the sense of guys are going to save they might pay for it in the initial purchase price, but at least they're not blowing their amps up, hopefully, because they'll shut down quietly, etc. So anyway, I don't know whether the picture helped there, Andrew. That was the idea of talking about grandfathers. Is with the loading, it sort of gives a bit of a mental picture as to what's happening. The tank is where the energy is, and you've got to extract the energy from that tank, and that's what the loading's all about, basically. Over.
Yeah, I understand. I could back that off and get rid of any heavier stations around me. And then I had the receiver coming off the actual pre-select. That's basically what it was. It was a pre-select for the receiver of the crystal radios there, all over.
Yeah, that's spot on. I've got a friend in Queensland that fiddled with crystal radios, and he learned more about tuned circuits and what all of us would know with such simple circuitry. But I was going to joke that Professor Julius Sumner Miller would say, "Well, my boy, you're fiddling with coefficient of coupling." That's what you're doing there. You're fiddling with coefficient of coupling, and with tuned circuits, that's what it's all about. So, if you can extrapolate what you were doing there to think about your pi network there on your FL2100, it's exactly the same physics that's going on. When you're increasing that loading control, effectively the loading control is coupling the real world antenna electrically into your tank. It's loading your tank, and your valves are looking for a resistive load, but they're looking for a load of a specific resistance, and that's when they'll deliver maximum available power. It's just that part of it's a really simple concept. They're looking for a resistor of a certain value, the plate load resistance. When they see it, they produce their maximum power, and that's what the Pi network's trying to adjust. It's trying to. The Pi network's magic in the sense it's trying to couple that real-world cantankerous device called a real-world antenna with reactance and resistance, because rarely do we have a perfect antenna in the real world. So it's trying to connect that real-world device to the tank, which has the valves hung off it, and the valves want to see they will produce their maximum power when they're presented with a resistance of the correct value. So there's a lot going on there, and each control interacts with the other. You move that loading control. Well, that's changing the coupling. It's changing the loading. It's changing the load on the tank. Therefore, you detune your tank. Just as when you move that coil in towards the secondary coil in towards the primary, there you were doing exactly the same thing. You were detuning the tuning, and you had to readjust the tune capacitor as a result. So yeah, it's exactly the same sort of caper going on. Anyway, I really should pop it over to Peter, if you don't mind there, Andrew.